Okay.
Welcome, everyone. This is going to be a rapid pace 1 hour. So I hope you've got a pen in hand, that you've got your PowerPoint printouts there, and that you're ready to write. 70% of what you write down is going to enable you to remember something. If you are not writing things down, 70% of what you hear is going to be forgotten. There's a 70-70 rule about adult education. So I want to urge you to take lots of notes. I'm going to speak quickly. If I go too fast, ask a question, ask me to slow down. That's okay. The content in this webinar is all derived from the trade school college curriculum that I wrote. It's taught at more than 70 trade schools throughout the United States and Canada. So this webinar is going to focus on some of the basics that enable a plumbing and heating company to deliver world-class service. So the agenda is to talk about retention and how that relates to congruency. Congruency is a very powerful force in business, as I will demonstrate later. We're also going to focus on some of the trends and what the American customer's mindset and psyche might be like, so we can focus on how we need to be delivering and communicating our information with customers. We'll focus on stress and some stress behaviors. We'll also talk about some proactive stress remedies and way we can remain more calm, especially during the peak weather seasons. We'll talk about the importance of attitude and how it relates to aptitude, and we'll focus on vocal tone, content, and listening. Listening is one of those empathetic skills that service professionals need to be good at, because customers don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And being a good listener is one of the ways a service professional demonstrates how much they care about the customer. And then we will wrap things up with some virtual customer service information specific to voicemail and email communication. So as we begin, let's dig into this word congruency as it relates to customer service. So you see this image on the screen, that what a customer sees from their window matters. And that's important, because if a customer has a broken hot water heater and they're waiting for a plumbing company to install a new one, or if the customer's heat isn't working and the customer is uncomfortable due to the thermal conditions, there's a sense of anxiety in the customer's mind. That anxiety causes a customer to wait by the window. And when they see your truck or your van coming down the street, the customer has a sense of relief and a sense of calm, because there you are. You're right down the block. And everything the customer sees through that window starts to culminate in the way that customer perceives a service company. So what if the customer saw through their window the dashboard of a van or a truck that looked like this on the PowerPoint? Now, what would they be thinking? Now, here's a dashboard of a truck that's littered with coffee cups and paper and paraphernalia, and the customer would think, what's this person going to be like when they come into my house? Are they going to be as sloppy inside my house as they are inside their truck? Now, that's a pretty long stretch of an assumption, but customers have every right to make assumptions. You see, customers see contractors and service companies as a commodity. In their mind, it's a bunch of blue-collar workers. And if a customer is going to spend money with a service company, they want to spend money on the cheapest guy in town. That's what a commodity is. A commodity is when a service company's service becomes indistinguishable from the competition. What I urge contractors to think about is differentiation. Differentiating your service so it stands out among the competition. Then when there's congruency between the value and the style with which your employees are communicating, that congruency results in a customer's mindset and psyche that perceives the value, and then a service company is worth every penny of what they're charging. Commoditization is not a good idea, because commoditization results in razor-thin profit margins, a price-only focus among customers, and diminished customer loyalty and less customer retention. Not a good thing. So the congruency factor becomes profound among all levels of frontline employees within a service company. So if we look on the next PowerPoint slide, And there's an organizational chart. So in this organizational chart, you have the company owner at the top, you have managers in the middle, and then frontline service people down towards the bottom. And frontline service people, whether you're a technician or you're a dispatcher or a phone rep, we get to think that perhaps we're not the most important people in the company. So this triangle represents that organizational chart. And perhaps this is how we see our company. It's the owner at the top and service personnel down towards the bottom. Customers, however, see things differently. To a customer, the person delivering the service, which means the technician or the installer who's on site, or the phone rep who's over the phone, that person becomes the person with the most vital role. That's what the customer perceives as the value a service company delivers. Let me make this clearer with a story. My wife and I moved into the house we live in today in Havertown, Pennsylvania, back in 1996. And 3 months after we moved into this house, during a cold January day, the furnace stopped working. So it was freezing cold outside, and now it was freezing cold inside. I was new to the neighborhood and had a hard time finding a service company who would come that day, but one did. And when the doorbell rang and I answered the door, there stood Tommy. Tommy was a technician in his mid-20s. He looked exhausted. He looked like he'd been out in the field about 10 hours already. But I was really happy to see Tommy. I invited him in. I escorted him downstairs, and after doing some diagnostic work on our furnace, he diagnosed a broken hot surface igniter, which he had in the truck, and he was able to install that night. So about 20 minutes after Tommy went out to the truck to get the part, we hear the furnace start to work. And my wife and I feel really good, and I can feel the heat coming out of the vents. And I go downstairs to check on Tommy, and I ask him how it's going, and Tommy says, everything's going fine. However, when I looked into your laundry room, Mr. Coscia, I noticed that the exhaust of your clothes dryer is attached to PVC pipe, and then it vents the hot air outdoors. And Tommy conveyed that PVC pipe could be a hazard in the presence of extreme heat, and that it should be replaced with sheet metal. So I asked Tommy, what can you do? And Tommy said, well, I can take some measurements tonight and go back to the shop, cut the sheet metal, and I'll come back and we can install it. And I said, great. Now, Tommy was the apex of that triangle. His ability to diagnose was one thing, but more importantly, his ability to build rapport and then find additional revenue opportunities was what made him employable and what enabled him to experience long-term employment. See, what Tommy did was upsell. And he was observant, he was curious, he looked around, and he found another revenue-generating opportunity. He has a vital role. What was more important about Tommy was his sense of timing, because he probably recognized that PVC pipe when he first walked into my basement. But his sense of timing taught him not to say anything until he got the furnace fixed. Once he went and installed the hot surface igniter and get the furnace to work, me and my wife, we experienced a sense of relief. Our guard came down. Now Tommy's the hero. Anything Tommy wants to suggest or speak to me about, I want to hear. So when he mentioned the PVC pipe, of course the answer was going to be yes. So he was able to use his sense of timing in just the right way to make the customer feel great, me and my wife, and to serve his employer well. Upselling, by the way, only works when there's a mutual benefit, when it's good for the customer and it's also good for the company. When both parties win, then everything works well. On the next slide, we're going to talk about the congruency sequence. Congruency sequence is extremely important. If a customer, for example, was looking for a plumbing and heating company, and they went online and saw a website, and the website looked good, and there was a number to call, and they called the number, and let's just say that the customer's call went to voicemail. Well, the first encounter was what the customer saw on the website. The second encounter is the phone call, which goes to voicemail. Now, a customer might think to themselves, how come no one's picking up the phone? Now, they might be concerned about that, or they might not be concerned about that. But subconsciously, the customer asks himself, is there congruency between the first and second encounter. And if the customer is okay with the fact that it went to voicemail, then the congruency exists. And if it exists and the answer is yes, that there is congruency, then the sequence may continue. But if the customer senses incongruency, if they think, no one picked up the phone, it went to voicemail, maybe I should call someone else. Well, now the customer senses incongruency. The answer is no. Whenever a customer experiences incongruency, that results in skepticism. Lack of congruency and the skepticism are what forces a customer's mind to shut down and say no. It's when customers become uncooperative. It's when customers start to question everything you're doing. It's when they start to look over your shoulder to make sure that you're doing things right. And that type of customer becomes a high-maintenance customer. So whenever there is a lack of congruency, this results in skepticism. The skeptical mind almost always says no. It shuts down. The open mind, the way I was with Tommy, thinking he was the hero, I was saying yes. He made a suggestion, and I agreed to invest in the sheet metal. So this congruency sequence that you see here, it's a very vital force that every step and sequence within a service company needs to be congruent. The people answering the phones ought to have skills that are comparable to the people out in the field. Our website needs to be congruent and similar to the look of our trucks and the phone number and the information that's on the panels of the trucks. When congruency exists across everything a service company does, customers remain more calm, which is the opposite of what happens when they get skeptical. Okay, let's continue and move on to the next slide. By the way, what you see on the PowerPoint is the big yellow box. It says judgmental heuristics, which is what this is. Judgmental heuristics is a person's bias or a person's assumption or perception. While people try to remain as objective as possible, we all have biases. People make assumptions, and customers have a license to make assumptions and to be biased. Customers have a license to misbehave. That's their job. Okay, let's continue. Teamwork and cooperation. When there's congruency across the whole company, you can limit this cartoon here where it says, I'm glad the leak isn't on our end. And everyone in a service company has to do their part. And enabling everyone in a service company to do their part is the job of management. I'm a big believer that it is management's job to make everyone within the company become more successful. And as an ex-service manager, one of the things that I had a discipline about was establishing expectations. So it was always in black and white regarding what I expected from people. My expectation of someone else was not based on a conversation. Conversations are like vapor. You say those words, and those words vaporize. And the person you might be speaking with might have heard something different than what you were saying, and 3 months later you try to refer back to a verbal conversation, it's vapor. Employees just don't have enough impact on what you might be saying. But when a manager puts it in black and white, and this is what I expect from people that work for me, now you have something you can use as a management tool. So expectations become vital. So what you see here on the PowerPoint is employee expectation guidelines. This is one of the guidelines that my company makes available to service companies. It's part of our whole resource materials that we make available. But these types of guidelines are vital. Look at some of these bullets. Be on time for work, obey the policies, respect the coworkers, be flexible during peak customer demand cycles, keep the truck clean, tell the truth, obey the traffic laws and be a courteous driver, attend in-house training classes and meetings. Those are just of the few things as suggestions. But when you sit down with an employee about these expectations, and then the manager signs this piece of paper and the employee signs this piece of paper, now we have something that's black and white, something that's tangible, something we can refer back to. So it's management's job to make people successful by ensuring that expectations are followed. So the expectations go even to dress codes. If you look at some of the bullets here, shirts and blouses, pants and jackets, hairstyle and hygiene, makeup and fingernails, tattoos, jewelry and piercings. This is just a few suggestions. But these are the things that we should be putting in people's personnel files. The manager and the employee, again, needs to agree to these. We can have expectations for almost anyone within the organization. Here's one for the technical service manager. Again, look at the bullets. Develop a stable infrastructure. Provide continual and ongoing training. Delegate effectively. All the things managers ought to be doing, and then naturally getting people to sign off. So black and white is the best way to do things. What I've learned about management is that a person without facts is just a person with an opinion. If it's in black and white, you've got facts. If it's an opinion, you got vapor. And you can't manage with vapor. Things need to be documented. Okay, let's move on and talk about some customer service trends. So on this slide, one of the things that was surfaced recently in a study published by the Public Agenda in New York City was that 80% of Americans surveyed say that lack of courtesy is a problem today. Now, lots of the anecdotal information in the survey was about how consumers feel when they shop, what they experience when someone might be in their home, but as a rule, Americans think there's a lack of courtesy today. So courtesy becomes this profound metric. Customers are saying they don't receive enough courtesy, and service companies ought to go out of their way to convey more courtesy when they speak with customers, both over the phone and in person. We should exceed expectations with simple yet profound behaviors. So what are some of the simple yet profound behaviors? People over the phone, when they answer a customer's call, should use the words may I instead of can I. We should be saying how may I help you instead of how can I help you. May I is proper grammar, and it just makes the person sound more intelligent and more capable. Whenever a customer assumes you're using proper grammar, they will also assume that you're smart. And if you want to be perceived as smart and capable, say may I instead of can I. Small things. Whenever a customer says thank you, never say no problem. Customer says thank you, you should say my pleasure. My pleasure sounds a lot more positive and courteous than no problem. And saying no problem is two negative words back to back. My pleasure is more courteous, sounds more euphemistic. So those are two of just some of the small and profound things that people can do to exceed customers' expectations. Out in the field, field people, ought to practice good personal hygiene. Simple yet profound. Good personal hygiene makes a difference. And it's not just about bad breath or body odor, but having a spare shirt in the truck and just trying to look neat and clean. Personal hygiene has a lot to do with what customers smell. And our sense of smell is different than all of our other senses. What we hear, what we touch, what we see, those senses are all gathered in a part of the brain called the cerebral cortex. But what we smell is handled in a part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is where the brain also handles emotion and memory. And emotion and memory and sense of smell culminate in that prefrontal cortex, and we've all had that sensation of we might smell an aroma that we haven't smelled for a while, and it almost immediately conjures up a memory. And that's because sense of smell and memory are handled in the same part of the brain. Well, customers will also never forget a stinky technician or a plumber with bad breath. And having breath mints, mouthwash, whatever we need to keep, handy wipes in the truck, just so we can practice good personal hygiene, is one of those ways we can make a positive difference. So, as it says on the PowerPoint, when these behaviors become pervasive among everyone within the company, then we start to impact the company's culture. And the company's culture is the stable infrastructure that we strive for. This is what enables a company to become differentiated among the competition. So what is the optimal service paradigm? So you see this on the PowerPoint, those three ovals there, and what they factor into as good service is what is management's role. So management's role, based on my experience as a service manager, is to serve the subordinates. Manager's job is to be an anchor for the young workers and to stretch the subordinates' skills. The best way to stretch subordinate skills is to keep raising the bar. What I've learned in managing people is that a person with a positive attitude is resilient. People with positive attitudes can reach for a higher bar, providing they feel like they're on the winning team. And it's the manager's job to ensure that everyone believes we are on the winning team, that we are going someplace good and someplace positive. The frontline workers who provide the service delivery, their role is to adhere to the expectations established by management. They're also to have a customer-centric attitude and to learn, learn, learn. Learning is a key part of everyone who is on the front line. If you're a technician, to continue getting new certifications, to get your CEU credits in. If you're on the phones or in the office, it's to continue to polish your communication skills, your listening skills. Make sure you're up on the new product specifications of the in-house processes and procedures, but never stop learning. Key things to do. Management also needs to meet the company's objectives, balance management and delegation. And I'm going to stop here for just a moment because delegation is such a key management discipline. The definition of management is getting things done through people. The definition of delegation is giving people things to do. And you can't do one without doing the other. Good managers have to be good delegators. And by delegating well, you also start to stretch your subordinate skills because you're giving people more things to do. And then finally, on the front line, frontline people should be told by management that their job is to get facts and to minimize opinions. So whenever a subordinate goes to a manager for help, manager ought to have a policy about, don't come to me with problems. If you've got an issue, think about the problem for just a minute. Come to me with the problem and some options you might have explored for how to resolve the problem. And when employees and the frontline subordinates start to get urged to think about some options for problem resolution, they become worth more, they become more knowledgeable, and they start to stretch some of their analytical skills. Good things to do. So the front line needs to have less complaints, more solutions, and they need to be urged not to take criticism personally. Now, whenever a manager provides constructive criticism, it is so we can all improve, not to take that personally. So that's the optimal service paradigm. You can see on this paradigm that responsible management and good frontline service delivery support customers' needs. They are the foundation for what enables a company to have a world-class service culture. So what is the cost of some of this? Well, here's a few words that are congruent to world-class service. One is attitude. What's interesting about attitude is that attitude correlates to a person's aptitude. Aptitude means ability, your ability to get things done. People with more positive attitudes are people with more positive aptitudes. And when I was a service manager, I only hired people with positive attitudes, because a bad attitude in a service organization is like a cancer. And a bad attitude starts to spread and starts to pull down and diminish everyone's aptitude. So the key thing is not to get there in the first place. Only let people in who have positive attitudes. Smiling, key service behavior. Over the phone, people can hear the smile. Face to face, the smile makes you more attractive and more inviting. What's interesting about the smile is that when people smile, the muscles in the face that form the smile have a certain physiology. And our endocrine system gets triggered by a person's physiology. When people smile, the endocrine system secretes endorphins into the blood. Endorphins are what make a person feel more euphoric and more positive. So the smile doesn't just make you look good, it also makes you feel good. So smiling, good for us, good for the customer. Everybody wins. Courtesy, as we discussed earlier, courtesy is a key differentiator. The American consumer says they're not getting enough common courtesy. So the more we can do to be courteous with our customers, the more we stand out and differentiate our service company. Being fearless, being courageous, especially when we listen to customers, because most people are not courageous listeners. They might hear a customer with a heavy foreign accent, or speaking with a customer who speaks too low, or perhaps slurs their speech, and many listeners are too embarrassed to ask a customer to repeat something. They'll just continue the hoax and hope that they won't get caught. And what I urge service professionals to be is fearless. You need to be courageous. If you didn't hear something, or if the customer has a heavy foreign accent, be fearless enough to ask, I'm sorry, what was that last part again? Just ask a question. Being courageous and fearless as a listener enables you to get all the information that you need to do your job. And what is the cost of these behaviors? Well, if you look at the PowerPoint, they're free. There's no cost for this. The only cost for this is enforcement, just to make sure that management enforces these behaviors so that the front line is delivering them to customers. So this wraps up some of the cost, but let's talk about another attribute of world-class service cultures. And it's minimizing what I call editorializing. Editorializing is what happens when employees say too much. And when I do ride-alongs with technicians out in the field, I'm amazed at what I hear people saying. They're saying things customers don't need to hear, and they're saying things that diminish the overall service company's perception in the customer's mind. So when a technician here on the PowerPoint says, sorry, I'm late, the office girls gave me the wrong address, that may be the truth. But throwing the office girls under the bus and blaming them doesn't make this technician look any better. When someone is on site and they got the wrong address or they're late for some other reasons, I suggest that person just apologize and they get to work. Take the responsibility for what happened. Don't blame the coworkers. Not good things. Editorializing also gets manifested in the image I just put up on the PowerPoint, where someone on the phone may say, if someone here told you that, then they're wrong. It's a good thing you're speaking with me. Not a good idea. Too much information. Customers don't need to hear it. Or the guy in that image who's saying, our competitor's service is poor. Based on what customers tell us, in fact, one customer said, that's just gossip. And I would suggest never bad-mouthing the competition. Rather than bad-mouth the competition, frontline workers should always be prepared to speak about how good we are. What differentiates us in the marketplace? Why we stand out as being the best. So never bad-mouth someone else, but be prepared and be rehearsed so you can speak well about what it is you do. So editorializing is a real issue because when people speak too much, everybody loses. Customers don't like it. The person who editorialized isn't looked in very positive terms by the customer. Nobody looks good. So what drives people to editorialize? I think the main driver here is ego. Ego is what drives people to editorialize. So what I suggest, relevant to a taxonomy, and the word taxonomy just means a classification of things that naturally go together. So the taxonomy for behavior that should be maximized is this right here: humility, empathy, and discretion. That builds rapport and it facilitates containment. Containment means making sure things don't get worse. So this is the behavior to ensure that people don't maximize or that people don't editorialize. The behavior that should be minimized is this behavior here: conceit, self-interest, and showiness. Ego is what often drives a person to editorialize. When we can get the ego out of the way and be focused on the customer, then a whole new presentation begins to develop, which enables us to deliver more world-class service. So editorializing is one of those factors I urge service companies to pay attention to, and management should enforce that. So attitude, aptitude, and the dreaded morning call. On the PowerPoint now, dreaded morning calls are common for anyone who works in a service company's office. They might know that sometimes the worst call of the day can be one of those first calls of the day. You know, from a customer who doesn't want to call the answering service. They've had a problem the day before or the night before. They couldn't get through, but they want to make sure they get you first thing in the morning. And, you know, and a service employee may come to work first thing in the morning with a sense of optimism and feeling good because it's the fresh start of a new day, and then they get blasted by that first call, and it's debilitating. And not letting our attitude suffer in the presence of that is key. So positive attitude, again, it improves a person's aptitude. Negative attitude, it diminishes a person's aptitude. That dreaded morning call, if it affects your attitude, there goes your performance for the day. Not a good thing. A dreaded morning call can ruin the whole day if your attitude suffers. So the key is not to get there in the first place. So what I suggest to avert what can happen during the dreaded morning call is what I call a split-second response. And this will be on the next PowerPoint slide. This is the split-second response. It's a pause, a slow, deep breath, and then rational thinking, followed by attentive listening, and then preparing to say what you can do instead of what you can't do. Very, very simple. When you practice the split-second response, that 1 or 2 second pause results in a much more constructive response rather than a reaction to what just happened. Because the rational thinking you'll experience drives you back to some of these core beliefs. That bad customer behavior is a symptom. It's not the problem. Too many service people see customer behavior as a problem. And we need to change our mindset. The root cause is whatever is causing the customer to behave that way. You can't fix a customer. So focus on fixing the root cause, the problem. When you take care of the equipment, regardless of what it is, then the customer's behavior starts to change. So never perceive the customer's behavior as the problem. It's a symptom. Stay focused on the root cause, which means exercise active listening skills. And this helps to contain situations. So how do you contain? You contain with this flowchart that I've put up on the PowerPoint. This flowchart is entitled Contain, Qualify, and Correct. So you see within the whole flowchart, there's the split-second response. If a customer isn't behaving well, this is what you do. Part of this whole process of containment. And containment means you keep it within fixed limits. Because when something's wrong, things are already bad. The service professional's job is to make sure it doesn't get worse. That's containment. So containment starts with a split-second response. It also includes letting the customer vent, because venting is therapeutic. So this is where the active listening and the empathy come in, letting customers finish. And when a customer says everything they want to say, or when they think you heard everything you need to hear, you know, then it's a lot easier to be more constructive and work towards a problem's resolution. Active listening includes asking questions. And when we use the words help me as a prefix to our qualifying questions, those words help me can be therapeutic, because those two words help me, they're therapeutic because they invite the other person into a more constructive interaction. You're inviting them to help you. So the words we select when you're working with customers, they start to make a big difference in enabling us to keep situations contained. Because if you don't keep situations contained and you perceive the customer as a problem, then stress starts to kick in. So if you look at some of these stress cycles here on the PowerPoint, homeostasis just means that's the state you're in when you're calm, and a customer might misbehave, and then there's a demand upon your system, then there's your reaction, and after the situation is over, you might get to recover. And this might happen in a case where perhaps there's a real threat or real danger. You might be chased by a wild dog or something else. But what happens on those peak incoming call days? If you work for a plumbing and heating company, let's say that first hot day in the summer or the first freezing cold day in the winter. On those days, these cycles look like this. Now there's no recovery because it's on to the next call. And this is why that split-second response is so vital. Because in the absence of a split-second response, people start to react. They start to perceive the customers or the workload as the problems. And once that happens, their fight or flight mechanism kicks in and diminishes their ability to serve customers well. Because whenever the fight or flight mechanism kicks in, it's all about you. It's all about what you perceive to be survival. And in world-class service, it should always be about the customer. So whenever it becomes about you, it's no longer about the customer. And that's what diminishes anyone's ability to serve customers well. So not getting stressed out and knowing how to contain situations and interrupt that split-second response is a key thing to do. All of this stress information and this flowchart is all included in our educational materials. I think everyone on this call is going to get some information from Katie Gilbert. It'll be a hyperlink to our videos and our curriculum and audio and books. But this information is covered in great detail in our videos. And they enable any service company to deliver world-class service. The bundles I've put together for PHCC are about half price of what you would pay if you went to our website. So there's a special discount. We offer a 100% guarantee on any of our materials. So if you watch our videos and you don't experience a substantial improvement in your service delivery, send them back. So far, no one has. Every service company that uses them experiences improvement. So you'll get the hyperlink. I urge you to pay attention to them. For the small investment, you'll get your return on investment in the first day after watching these videos. And I've included some special value-added items such as 1 hour of my consulting for a service company who invests in this, or our Jeopardy resource material. The Jeopardy game is a PowerPoint file that goes along with our curriculum that you can use in this service company. So if you really want to dig into this subject matter, you can do that. And you can do that through the videos and the curriculum materials that we've made available. Okay, let's continue with this topic of stress. I think that stress and lifestyle balance, they go hand in hand. Achieving lifestyle balance renders a person to be more calm and more balanced, and that person has an easier time remaining positive. So some of the key factors that enable a person to stay balanced, the first one is diet. What you're eating and what you're drinking can contribute to your stress. Drinking too much coffee, for example, the caffeine in the coffee causes a person's adrenal gland to overproduce and secrete epinephrine, a hormone that speeds up their heart rate. It renders a person into a state of hyperalertness. So some of what people are eating and drinking can be causing some of their stress. Eating more whole foods like fruits and vegetables renders a person with a better diet. A fresh fruit like a banana, for example, has the vitamins, minerals, fiber, and potassium, but a banana also contains tryptophan. Tryptophan is an essential amino acid, and when it is ingested, the ingestion of tryptophan causes our bodies to produce serotonin, which is a drug prescribed for people who lack mental clarity. Our bodies can produce it. So, what you're eating and drinking, they can make a difference for how we experience our lifestyle balance. Getting enough rest, making sure that on days when you're working at peak performance levels that you're balancing your work and your rest. Not thinking irrationally. Irrational thinking results in stress. When a person sees themselves as a victim, when they have that why me mentality, that is irrational thinking. A person needs to believe that they have options, that they have solutions. And if any frontline worker ever needs help, they should always seek supervision to get there. Ask your boss or ask your manager. Procrastination results in stress, putting things off. So what do people put off? They may put off putting the tools away. They may put off the filing. They may put off putting away the spare parts. But when things start to pile up around the shop or around the office, that's procrastination. Wherever I see clutter, I usually see lots of stress. Procrastination and stress go hand in hand. And then finally, self-talk. What people say to themselves really matters. And self-talk is what technicians do when they're alone in their truck. And they'll often talk to themselves. And keeping self-talk positive is vital, because the more positive the self-talk is, the more positive the attitude is. So these 5 factors are just some common sense ideas to help diminish some of the stress any frontline worker might have to experience. So moving on, empathy, and then share your expertise. These 2 words, empathy and expertise, start with the letter E. And the key thing about empathy is that customers don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. What you know is about your expertise, and that enables you to diagnose problems and troubleshoot. But before you get to exercise and use your expertise, you first have to convey enough empathy so that there's trust. The way Tommy did when he came to my home. He conveyed the empathy first, and that enabled him to leverage his expertise. So the balance any service worker has between their empathy and expertise makes a big difference. For people who work in the office and opening and closing calls, paying attention to greetings, how they open and close calls, and how they close calls makes a difference. Closing a call should always include the mutual closure, which is just a question such as, are there any other questions I might be able to answer for you? Just get to that mutual closure so that both parties know that we're almost done. When you're working over the phone or working in person, truth is paramount. It's always better to disappoint a customer with the truth than to satisfy a customer with a lie. And this is the hallmark of our customer service handbook. The book we've published is all based on delivering value, delivering the truth, so that customers experience our service company as an ethical and cultured world-class service company. The words we choose when you're telling the truth make all the difference. For example, using I instead of it, or I or it instead of you. Here's an example. Someone could say, you broke the faucet, or they can say, it wasn't designed to operate under those conditions. You broke the faucet implies blame. It wasn't designed to operate under those conditions is neutral. Whenever we practice pronoun substitution, and we substitute you with I or it, you're conveying something a little more positive. So our curriculum materials have scores of scripts like this. How to substitute the right words to convey the right information so people don't perceive that blame is being implied. Here's another example. How to accentuate the positive. Instead of saying, I'm sorry you had to wait so long, you say, thank you for being so patient. The way you phrase something makes all the difference to the person who's hearing it. And what are they hearing? What they're hearing mostly, especially over the phone, is tone of voice. Over the phone, 80% of what the customer hears is the tone of voice. So that smile, that pace of speech, that tone that customers hear make all the difference. It's a key thing. When you're working over the phones or even in person, always practice restraint and not retaliation. Over the phone, retaliation often comes across as that snippy tone of voice that customers hear. That snippy tone of voice is a form of retaliation. Some people do it subconsciously, but when customers hear it, they don't like it. So if you're working over the phone, practice restraint, because retaliation is going to be one of two outcomes. The customer is going to become more upset, making your job more difficult, or the customer is going to cancel their contract and call another contractor. And this is all about customer retention, not customer defection. So to keep the customers you have, important to convey the empathy and practice restraint and not retaliation. I promised just some virtual information here about voicemail. Voicemail is nothing more than an input-output device. It's like a database. Similar to any database, you put garbage in, you get garbage out. Voicemail is the same way. You put garbage in and you get garbage out. If people leave a message and they slur their speech or they speak too quickly so that someone can't hear the phone number and have to replay it over and over again, that's garbage. It's not a good idea. With voicemail, put quality in, you get quality out. So that's the way callers should leave voicemail messages. The key to voicemail messages is that they shouldn't take more than 20 seconds. It starts with your name, your phone number, then the reason for your call, and then your phone number again. Always say the phone number twice when you're leaving someone a voicemail message. For the recipient of voicemail, you can invite quality in and get quality out. You can invite quality in by recording your greeting and invite people to say their phone number twice. So your greeting could be something like, "Hi, this is Steve. I'm away from my desk right now. If you go in to say your phone number, please say it twice. Thanks, bye." You can invite the quality in. So virtual communication needs lots of improvement. Voicemail's not going away. It's been here for a while, and it'll continue to be here. Let's just use it well by putting more quality in. Relevant to email, just a few simple rules. Spell check 100% of all outgoing email. Refrain from sending angry emails. Remember that emails can be forwarded to others. So there's litigious issues that can arise if someone sends out the wrong message and it goes viral. That could be a real issue. And then also, if ever you type an email and you look at your computer screen and you're not sure about whether or not you should send it, don't send it. Whenever you second guess yourself on an email that you've written, I suggest that you print the email, give it to your coworker, and get an objective set of eyes on it. That objective set of eyes is going to see something you haven't seen. So whenever you second guess yourself on an email, don't send it. Key thing to do. So I have covered lots of information at a very fast pace. I thank everyone on this call for being so patient with the rapid method I use to get all this information across.